Inco noted by Arloch, Chapter 1. I hate you! I'm stopped dead. Olivia's words cut through me more deeply than any knife or claw ever could. I felt like I had been gut punched and the wind escaped my lungs, as if her words were a physical force. My throat grew tired. Hate? She hated me? I stared at the green gator girl before me. No, that made no sense. It was just some late night patented Olivia's sarcasm and dark humor. A terrible joke, really. I'd have to admonish her later for the poor taste, but my throat didn't loosen, and I wasn't sure I'd start breathing again yet. And the look in her eyes was. We stared at one another, eyes locked. I wasn't sure how long, but it was at least a full agonizing minute, likely longer. Her face wasn't filled with fury or spite or hurt or any of the emotions I'd come to see Olivia express over the last months. It was nothing. It was a stare completely bereft of feeling at all. It was worse than the first time we met, and she tried as hard as possible to look through me completely. There was there was a chance, yes, I may have caused some of the issues tonight, but if I could just show her my sincerity, then we could leave this awful night behind us. I could repair the damage and get everything moving forward again. She was hurt, and while she frustrated me often, it was understandable. This night didn't go how either of us expected, and it was like her lashing out at the pain's place. She clearly felt backed into a corner and was striking out at anyone in range, even me. And I could forgive her for that. I needed to make my move, to let her know that was the case. I straightened myself up and extended my arms out wide, a smile on my face to show my sincerity. Hey, hug it out? A new expression. Pure disgust. Another gut punch. But this time, I held firm. Olivia deflates slightly, without saying anything, breaks eye contact, and begins rolling towards the elevator nearby. I step in front of her, my arms still spread. I wouldn't let her give up that easily. Not anymore. My message was clear. Hug me, Gator Girl, and we'll work this all out. She doesn't even acknowledge me as she tried to work her way around my blockade. Sorry, Olivia. Not today. I cut her off again and lean in, my hands finally landing on her shoulders. My arms snake around her neck and I pull her in as close as I was able, the awkward position. Her entire body seized immediately at contact. She began to shake like a leaf in the wind. Is she finally beginning to realize that my thoughts was left incomplete as her hands fiercely grabbed at my back before working their way to my elbows with a strong jerking motion. Using her superior strength, she easily plied my arms off her as she pushed away instinctively. My brain began to spin into overdrive. How could this not have worked? It always works in movies, right? Apply a little pressure to the disgruntled maiden, and she'll eventually relent, and you can work through the issue like adults. So what was her problem? I looked down at her as my shoved arms cleared my vision. Another new expression. Complete panic. Was my move really that awful? My eyes shifted focus, and I realized that she had pushed herself directly towards the stairs. Adrenaline dumped into my system immediately. It was I was not about to let my girlfriend accidentally kill herself in a panic over an awkward hug on the night of the winter formal. Hell no! My legs tensed painfully. I brought my arms down as fast as physically possible towards her outstretched hands. I was never a particularly physical person, but Sully's gym classes clearly had helped my reflexes and accuracy. My hands connected to Olivia's forearms, and I pulled as hard as possible. Her momentum arrested, and she drew closer. Wait, no. I was falling down the stairs now, too. I had failed her again. Time continued to move in slow motion. A small part of my brain marveled at my ability to take all of this in. In what was honestly only a second or two of time, my eyes never left hers. The expression of panic, pleading for help as we tumbled, burned me to my very core. I had a single option left, and I was all too happy to use it for her. I turned my torso as hard as possible and yanked both my arms around and in. I still had a death grip on her forearms. It was time for me to do a little death roll of my own. The weight of her contacting with my center of mass completed my semi-planned bowl maneuver. For her now above me and me below. We were almost at the middle landing now, and she'd have me as a cushion. I was okay with that. It it would probably hurt like hell, but maybe we'd get time to talk things out on the way to the hospital. Maybe that was the moment we needed to sort this awful night out. My eyes remained locked to hers. I was surprised to find her eyes had gotten even larger than they had been before as realization creeped in at what I was doing. It's okay, Olivia. I'm here for you. My head swarmed as it felt like my body was upside down from the orientation of my head. Like I'd fallen through myself and upwards was downways, and vice versa. It was hard to articulate. After a few moments of horrific disorientation, this sensation slowly subsided. I wasn't sure how long it took, but eventually I felt anchored to the world enough to try opening my eyes. It was dark. The lights were off. Only a razor thin, pale beam of light got past the curtain of the room, casting just enough illumination to light it as my eyes adjusted. Nighttime clearly. Nighttime clearly. Given how groggy I felt, I had to have been out for a few hours then. The impact must have been worse than I thought. I tried to turn my head, only to find that that was impossible. As I tried to pivot my head around what look, I felt the telltale sign of a brace around my chin. They immobilized my neck? Oh, oh God, did I break my neck? I forced myself to steady my breathing and tried moving my hand. It wasn't easy. It felt like I hadn't moved it in years, but sure enough, I was able to will it off the bed and wiggle my fingers in front of my eyes. Then, it was then I noticed my vision was blurry. Right, my prescription sunglasses went beyond. I grunt, resolved to find them after I finished my status check. Next to my left arm, all good. And both legs, also good. I wasn't paralyzed. A wave of relief washed over me, shortly followed by a wave of shame. Nice going, Inco. Panicking because you may have become paralyzed like your girlfriend while saving your girlfriend. I pressed down the galling thoughts and continued to try and build a sense of what had happened. Obviously, I was in a hospital. My neck is immobilized, but otherwise I'd be able to move my limbs. just fine. I was clearly out for several hours. A neck injury was the likeliest explanation, along with a concussion. I think those can make you pass out. I couldn't remember anything specific from movies or documentaries I'd watched, but that felt plausible. I didn't feel any pain though, so maybe it was just a precautionary thing. Other than being really tired, my body honestly felt pretty good. It's really tingly. With a grunt, I tried to push myself off the surface of the hospital bed. My strength quickly left me. Very quickly. I barely had left the padded surface. I barely had even left the padded surface of it before sinking back down. Okay, the sitting position was a no-go then. I rolled to my right, and that actually worked decently well. I was now able to see the rest of the hospital room. It was empty. I felt disappointed. I had honestly expected Olivia to be by the bedside, sleeping from her wheelchair draped over the side of it, waiting on bated breath for me to awaken. That's how it always went in movies, right? The pains weren't waiting either, or my parents. The last one didn't surprise me, certainly, but it did hurt. I lay back into bed as tears began to well in my eyes as I forced the sensation down. Relax, idiot. It's clearly crazy early in the morning. The visiting hours would be long over. You're panicking over nothing again. I took several long, calming breaths to steady myself. Sure, it's frustrating no one was here to see you awake, but they'll see you they'll see you're up and going again in a few hours. When visiting hours opened back up, I let out a sigh as I managed to convince myself to relax. I hope Olivia was right. Okay. Last thing I remember is myself definitely being between her and the floor of the landing in the stairs. Though she should be safe. She may have gotten some bumps and bruises, but if I took the brunt of it, she'd be fine. Remembering back to how she pushed me away, almost got herself killed, sparked a flash of bitterness. The whole evening was just being she was just being pissy and bitter about everything. Sure, looking back, I wasn't helping much as a boyfriend should have, but that didn't mean that my heart rate monitor was speeding up enough. I took notice of it, pulling me out of the angry thoughts. No, she was deeply troubled. She wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It was an honest mistake, born out of grief. What mattered is that I saved her. I saved her, and we'd have a chance to talk things out. I shuddered at the thought of what could have happened if I didn't grab her in time and push those thoughts out of my head. She was okay. She had to be. I wasn't sure how long I'd stayed there, staring at the unfocused ceiling exactly long enough that the sliver of moonlight was turning into a bright, cutting blade of morning sun. I couldn't get to sleep, which was weird, since I felt so incredibly tired. I think I had completely zoned out a few times, but without anything in the room to differentiate time passing other than the steady beeps of my heart monitor. Oh, sort of blended together. At some point, someone would probably do the rounds and check on me, and I can ask about Olivia, and the pains too, I guess. I was still mad at them. They didn't specifically. They'd still want to know I was okay. Sure, we left the winter film on poor terms, and Damon smashed my camera and punched me, but I didn't want to lord my injury over them. I was better than that. At the same time, though, I also couldn't motivate myself to press the call button in the center bed at any point in the last indeterminate hours either. I honestly couldn't even think of a reason why. I was right next to my hand, but somehow I couldn't bring myself to press it. Maybe it was some dumb sense of wanting to claw back and move. To claw back that movie-esque moment of coming to when someone was around. Maybe I was just trying to force stillness out of myself so I could get a bit more sleep. Or maybe I did want to feel bad about what happened to me a little longer. Another wave of shame. God, maybe Damien was right. Was I really, was I just trying to capture another perfect artistic moment? Some of the last words I heard from him echoed in my mind. No, no, I get it perfectly. You think you're an artist. How could you do this to her, man? He looked so hurt. He'd been angry at me in that moment, certainly, enough to destroy my camera and the pictures from the photo, but as I remembered his words, I remembered the look in his eyes. Underneath the brewing rage was the look of a man who had been stabbed in the back. You brought her out of her shell, only to shove her back in. Had he been right? My mind spiraled, trying to recall everything that had happened that night. Damien had been frustrated before. Hell, he actually had attacked Olivia before we left for the formal. But in that moment, at our final confrontation, he looked at me like I was the cause of it all. I thought back to a moment ago, that sensation of wanting them to be unaware I was awake so I could have perfect dramatic reveal. I really wanted that. Damon's expression flashed again in my mind, and my head swam again. How could you do this to her, man? I couldn't see well before, but the tears filling my eyes made it fully impossible. I squint my eyes shut and hold my breath. It's a lost cause. I cried as quietly as possible in a completely empty room. When was the last time I cried? I think it was with Olivia at some point before everything else happened. Before we lost Mr. Yadid. Remembering his name sent a fresh flash of guilt for me. God, Yadkin, I'm so sorry. What I helped do to Olivia. I lost myself to the quiet sobs. More time passed. Hard to say how long I cried. I like to imagine it was a reasonable, manly amount, but frankly, it probably wasn't. And I wouldn't know what a right amount of crying would even be, anyways. I ran out of tears, and eventually my breath steadied. The warm orange scar on the far wall of the room had moved a small ways, so it probably wasn't that long. And I hope someone came so before before I could even finish the thought. A soft knock on the door. I tried to mumble out an answer, but between lying in bed for hours now and my recent crying session, my throat was impossibly dry, and I couldn't manage more than a quiet, gravelly grunt. After a moment of no apparent response, the door slid open, and the nurse swung around the room. The goldenrod-coloured stegosaurus strolled towards the bed, but stopped about halfway when she realized that I was awake and staring at her. She had paused a beat before continuing the rest of the way to the bed. Oh, you're awake! This is excellent news! I just need to check a few things, and then we can have the doctor in here in a jiffy to check in on you, okay? How are you feeling? I managed to clear my throat and then gave a coarse but proper response. Good. She paused, her fidgeting with the IV line, and looked down at me. I'm sorry, what did you say? S- Her brow furrowed, an odd response. Can you tell me your name? I felt my own brow furrowing in response to the inane question. Neo. Her expression cascaded to a full frown now. My heart had begun to pick up. What was her problem? She leaned down slightly and held up 3 fingers. How many fingers am I holding up? Or I confirmed. She shook her head. Please mirror my gesture if you can. This time I rolled my eyes and let out a huff. Whatever her deal was beginning to get annoying. Rather than worrying, I lifted my arm and flashed her 3 fingers in reply as she asked. Unfortunately, this didn't do much to dissuade her dark expression. I knew I had been pre-injured between the neck brace and the bandages I'd felt out earlier on most of my head, even the black eye that Damien had given me. Did I really look that bad once? She got a glance at me. Was there something wrong I couldn't see? You relax right there, and I'll be back with the doctor soon, okay? Her voice had a soft, comforting coo. She also had bled off the dark expression of a practiced, this will make you feel better one, which, if I'm being honest, didn't work at all. She quickly moved out of the room, and the door slid closed behind her. The hell was that about? I touched a hand to the bandages and pulled it away, expecting to see a hand covered in seeping blood or something, but it came back clean. My black eye seared when I touched it, but I doubt that was anything special either. It was gnawing at me. What was her deal? Was I going to have to get up and dance to show I was fine? All I could do was wait, and I was getting very tired of waiting by myself. So let me get some water. Fortunately, it was only a few scant moments, as far as I could tell, before another knock at the door. I replied a vague yeah at it, and a moment later it swung open. Unlike the stego that was a nurse, my doctor was a bright red parasol. The scale hue was strikingly reminiscent of Mia's, but my doctor was both male and also not covered in sharpened spikes. So that was fun, nice at least. It and it made sense too. Wouldn't want a doctor that could cause even more injuries just by turning around. I could feel my face tightening with a frown as I remembered when I last talked to Mia before everything fell apart. She was so smug, so assured that she knew everything about Olivia. Hello there. We haven't met properly yet. My name's Dr. Naked. How are you feeling today, Inco? Or, well, fine. Clearly, my response didn't match the scowl on my face. The doctor muttered something to the nurse I didn't catch before she left the room. Inco, do you remember what happened? He asked. His brilliant blue eyes were locked onto mine. Miss, yeah. The doctor's face darkened more. Can you understand what I'm saying? With with treat wrong. I mean, as a as my temper flared and I moved to raise my voice, I noticed then that the shout didn't feel quite right. Inco, not if you understand what I was saying. Cold, sen- cold serious tone in Dr. Niquette's voice was commanding my full attention. Slowly and deliberately, I noted once in confirmation. Do you remember what happened? This, this time, I combined with a nod to emphasize. The doctor let out a small sigh. Oh, think. I was supposed to notice. Okay, Inco, I need you to listen to me. I stiffen up at the new shift in tone. If I had thought he was serious before, it was worse now. I watched him as he pulled one of the sitting chairs and situated himself next to me. Inco, you have been unconscious for 3 days now. Oh, that sounded bad. Like, really, really bad. Your friends and family were here when you'd arrived, but after we patched you up and didn't regain consciousness, we had them go home to rest. Your parents arrived the morning after, but you again missed them. So, my parents did visit. That was something at least. I told the nurse to contact them so they can be here for you. There's some important information about what happened to you that they'll want to hear as well. I reflexively felt myself frown with worry at the phrasing. Your life isn't in danger, but as you suspected, you were injured quite severely, and with you still unconscious, we couldn't establish the full scope of your condition. That made some sense at least. Okay, a moment later, the nurse knocked, was granted entry, but only popped her head into the room, enough to give a frown and shake her head, and I knew what that meant. They couldn't get a hold of my parents. Fucking wonderful. I apologize, Inco. We appear to be unable to contact your parents at this time. Do you know if there's another way to contact them, or do you have another emergency contact? The Paints had offered himself, but your parents were disinclined to allow people outside the family to act as a contact. I wanted to be disappointed that my parents apparently stonewalled the Pains being a point of contact for me before pissing off to yet another business trip while I was in a coma. In fact, I was. I was livid, but I tamped that feeling down for now. The screaming could happen later. The Pains offered themselves as emergency contacts. Just what? After what had happened at their place before the thermal. After I watched their whole family unit melt down in front of me, no doubt Damien told them his side of the story of what I had done before, too. And even then, my tears began to well in my eyes again. Why couldn't they have been my real family? Maybe this would have turned out different. I forced myself to be composed again. And the doctor I forced myself to be composed again, and the doctor gave me the time I needed. He held out a notepad and pen to me as I went to answer. Face. You can write it down here, and we'll see to it that they're contacted, he said with a practiced, gentle smile. I nodded and quickly wrote down Damien's number. If I tried hard enough, I could probably remember the Payne's house phone number, but I was too tired. And Olivia, I couldn't bring myself to deal with that yet. I wanted to tell her I was okay, and that it wasn't her fault, but having the doctor call her felt wrong. She should have heard things from me. She should hear an apology, first and foremost. The doctor took and scrolled out the contact info and informed me they would contact them immediately. He said that once they got Sorry I'm pausing so much. My body's just yawning and doing that sort of. He said that once they got here, he would go over the details of what happened, but in the meantime, I should rest. You need it, he said, and I felt it. I had been awake for hours now after apparently coming out of a 3 day coma, and I felt exhausted. What? Yeah, sure. I mumbled at the doctor as he exited the room, and then sleep overtook me. When I awoke, it was certainly later in the day, and I realized quickly I had company. I turned to my side and found Mr. Payne sitting in the chair nearby, reading a book. I shifted and tried to wipe the sleep from my eyes before muttering a hello. This got his attention. He practically threw the book into the chair as he stood. Inco! Thank God! The doctor said he'd woken up, but he'd gone back to sleep by the time I got here. He looked quite flustered, which was to be expected, I guess. I may have sourced my relations with pains. I may have soured my relations with pains, but no one really wants to see a friend or family die, or at least end up in a coma. I didn't like seeing him like this, but I did appreciate that he cared. He fumbled a bit and pressed the call button and turned back to me. How are you feeling, son? Tired. Okay. Mr. Payne adopted a frown now as well. I was beginning to greatly dislike this pattern that was forming. Inco, are you? Ah, Inco. Good to see you're awake, Dr. Nick had called. Niket? Niket. Neither I nor Mr. Payne had heard the knock. He must have been close by. Hey, Doc. Please, have a seat. We have important matters to discuss. And as Inco had chosen for you to act at his emergency point of contact, while his parents are unavailable, you'll need to hear this as well, the doctor began. What do you mean, unavailable? My understanding is that they were visiting Inco. My Payne, Mr. Payne adopted a slight sneer. Visited. They visited for a short while after the first night, but had since been unavailable. As such, Inco has deferred to you as his point of contact in the meantime. Nikit explained coolly. Probably a business trip again. Happens. Well, for well, fine. I offered. I, it wasn't special today, but there was nothing I could do about them now. My response clearly caught their attention, but I didn't seem to make either of them feel better. That act as good as that acts as good as segue to the important matters. What? Inco, as I told you before, you have had been you had been unconscious for 3 days. The root cause of this was a traumatic brain injury when you landed. So then the neck brace began to say, would you love to touch it? The neck brace is there because you injured your neck as well. Thankfully nothing severe, but it appears that when you landed, you had your friend's wheelchair under you at the bottom of the stairs. On impact, it twitched your neck before your head made contact with the floor. We don't believe the neck injury to critical values immobilized to give your body time to heal, he explained. Mr. Payne had taken up sentry next to the bed and had a comforting hand placed on my shoulder. A far more serious matter is a brain injury. This can manifest symptoms in a multitude of ways and become a critical concern when the patient does not easily wake up after being knocked unconscious, like you were. We did scans and noted some trauma to the brain in addition to the rather nasty cuts you suffered. Unfortunately, we couldn't get a full scope of the impact of your injury until you awoke. All I could do was nod as my stomach sank. I actually suffered brain damage, but I felt fine. Was I lucky? I need to clear my nose. No, that couldn't be. Everyone's expressions today made that made that an impossibility. I've called for a speech language pathologist to give you a visit to administer proper tests. You should arrive tomorrow, but based on your response, I had a suspicion you'd suffered from dysarthria. Dysarthria? Dysarthria. I couldn't help but tilt my head in confusion. That term meant nothing to me. What is that? I asked. It's exactly what you just did. What? Inco, I want you to repeat after me, but really listen to yourself. I know today had been quite a whirlwind, but this is important, okay? I nodded, swallowing back in gnawing fear. Hello, my name is Inco G. Nido. I took a breath and slowly repeated the words back to him, afraid of that sentence. It was a magic spell that breaks an illusion I was under. Oh God, what was that? Oh, I, I hadn't really listened to myself back until now. I don't think people really do that, but at the doctor's behest, I was really listening to the sounds I was making, and it sounded like I had 200 cotton balls in my mouth. I couldn't feel my, I could feel my breathing quicken. I tried to ask him another question, but it only came out in a strangled squeak. Inco, listen to me, please. I nodded, my eyes misting again. Dysphoria is a condition in which the subject has difficulty speaking. The pathologist will be able to properly diagnose your condition, but as far as I can see, you can understand what's being said to you well enough, and you are able to clearly write the pains. Contact info down. I don't believe your ability to understand or use language to be damaged, but your ability to speak it has. I reflexively croaked out another meaningless noise. Rebel. I felt Mr. Payne's hand tighter on my shoulder, attempting to give me strength. I had felt alright about managing to control my emotions earlier in the morning when I was by myself, but I couldn't keep myself together anymore. The tears flowed freely, and I felt myself folding forward as I sobbed. Mr. Payne scooped me into his arms like I was his own child and whispered comforting words to me. I was a broken person now. I was broken. I wonder if this is how Olivia felt when she realized she couldn't. God, what a shitty thing to think. I squashed down that comparison as hard as I could. Olivia hated being seen by her condition, and my first thought was to. No wonder she said she hated me. Eventually the wells ran dry, and I reflexively wiped my eyes, only to suffer a jolt of pain as I thoughtlessly rubbed my black eye. Mr. Payne, Mr. Payne took a proper stock of it with a frown. That boy's going to get a talking to when I get home. That boy's going to get a talking to when I get home, Mr. Payne mumbled under his breath. I grabbed his arm to get his attention and tried to explain that Damien was innocent. Unfortunately, the words barely flopped. limply out of my mouth. I couldn't get my jaw, lip, and lips to move properly. I shook my head in frustration. No, no, oha, I said, thrusting a hand out to him. To his credit, it only took him a moment to raise the quest, and he handed over the notepad and pen again. Right. Mr. Payne raised what the game plan was immediately, and even offered me a small but warm smile. I had no idea what Damien had told us that, but I didn't want to dig into all the details yet, not before I'd had time to process my own thoughts. There was so much I didn't understand about what had happened at the Winter Formal. So many blind spots I needed more time. But Damien shouldn't be punished for what he did, for being a good brother to his sister. Fuck Inco from the Winter Formal. Damien was a damn good brother. I frowned as I thought about those last moments and quickly scrolled on the pad my response. Damien did nothing wrong. I deserved it. Mr. Payne's eyes flickered from the pad to my eye and then away. He was clearly trying to put the pieces together. He frowned but relented the point for now and let out a sigh. Okay, son. We'll talk about it later. So, Doc, what happens now? Mr. Payne said, returning his attention to the physician. As I had said, the specialist that can administer the proper tests will be here tomorrow. So in the meantime, we'll focus on getting you back up to full strength. Otherwise, while the main symptoms may be your ability to speak, that brain injury is no joke in other ways too. So we'll be focusing on speeding your recovery. The most important thing for the moment is to rest, he answered. Right. Mr. Payne's hands returned to my shoulder as he offered me a weak smile. Good, that's good. If there's anything you need, Doc, and anything, 24/7, give me a call. Mr. Payne said, his voice issued a, his voice issued as a command. Of course, I'll let you two be for now and check back in on you in an hour. We'll certainly be hungry soon, Dr. Nikit said with a small, soft smile before quietly leaving the room. Mr. Payne took a seat and looked at me dead in the eyes. How are you holding up, son? You've been you've you've had a pretty rough go of it. I could feel my throat tighten up again. I was so awful to them all, and here he is caring about me. Miha pan. I fumbled my speech again. This would take a lot of getting used to. Whoa now, son. I told you before. Call me Randy here. He gently chided my forepaw before placing the notepad back in my hands. I didn't deserve it. I really didn't. I stretched his family home to the breaking point, nearly killed his goddaughter, and made his blood son hate me. And even now, I could only see fatherly warmth in his eyes. I wish I knew what that had been like before now. I didn't know what I was going to do or how I was going to do it, but I was going to make things right by this man and his family. I didn't care if it took me the rest of my life. We would certainly go over the painful details of what happened later. But for now, I was happy to experience actual familial love for the first time since I could remember. I took up the pen again and scratched out a reply. Thanks, Randy. He beamed. Anytime, son. Food arrived shortly after, and even being hospital food, I was ravenous. I think I gave Olivia a run for her money and how quickly and violently I ended the food on the tray. While I ate, Randy talked to the staff to get my belongings returned to me now that I was awake. After eating, I felt the other half of the digestive system rumbling to life and moved to get myself out of bed properly. They had detached the IV line previously, so I was free and untethered. Unfortunately, the trip to the other side of the room on the bathroom was proved to be too much of an excursion for me so soon after waking. My legs giving out almost immediately. Randy arrived back in the room to see me at the base of the bed, and after a brief freak out, with me vigorously shaking my head and gesturing, he realized what had happened. A nurse arrived shortly after, and he helped me work my way over to the bathroom while I was able to relieve myself. My legs definitely were still working, but I was clearly still weakened, and would take a bit of time to get my energy back up. And there was a small flash of guilt at the sensation of relief that came with the realization I could, in fact, still walk. Nice work, Inco. Continuing to prove you're a real piece of work. My expedition concluded. I was back in bed and recuperating when Randy drew my attention. Hey, son, they tell me your old clothes were a total loss, and apparently the jacket, shirt, and pants were contaminated with blood from the head injury and were disposed of. They had your shoes and socks, but I wasn't sure how much you cared. I had a moment of amusement. The loss of the clothes was sad, certainly, but I don't think Randy realized how much of a loss it was, price tag wise. The pains certainly weren't poor by any stretch, but they had to pinch pennies in times. He'd probably balk at hearing the price of the clothing items. He may faint if he was told that the socks which were saved were the most expensive component of my formal outfit. And a flash recollection of when me and Olivia detoured to grab her a new dress after Vinny had an accident and she needed a new one. I was paying for the new dress and Olivia really passed out in a wheelchair when she realized the dress she had picked out was over $1,000. A smile creeped across my face for only an instant, then died when I remembered how unimpressed I was at her selection. She liked the look of it, but okay, okay, that looks okay. So dismissive. She didn't. I thought she was picking wrong before she even showed me the dress she'd selected. She liked it, and my first thought was how she had picked the wrong one. I didn't even consider how it looked on her. It was just the wrong kind of dress. Go? I could feel my face tweaking into a frown as my brain made another leap connection. It wasn't even the first time I was so smug and dismissive over time. Other times when I had to butt my opinion in when people were enjoying themselves. Like, I had any idea or opinion of my own worth for listening to. Like, my opinions were the one that actually mattered. My frown grew into a sneer as I considered how many times I'd done that in the past. My hands clenched down on the blanket until my knuckles turned white. Inco! Randy had said again, bringing me back at the moment. What's wrong, son? You're looking mighty worked up. Let me call in. I dismissed the idea with a wave of my hand and scratched out a note to him. clothes don't matter. It's fine. I don't I don't think he believed it was fine, but he let it drop for the moment. You did have a you did have a spare of your sunglasses in your jacket pocket. That made it out okay though, said with a small smile and had her over the spectacles. I nodded and returned him a weak smile of my own and donned the eyewear. At least I could see normally again. After a beat, Randy continued. Michael, Mr. Ferris said your phone was unfortunately a total loss, but he was able to find your wallet. He was pretty adamant on securing it. He was pretty adamant on securing it in case it had any medical info. Final article was turned back over to me. I checked it out, finding my ID card and cash intact. I didn't actually think Mr. Ferris would rob me, but I had a knee-jerk reaction to check. Never a wave of guilt and shame. My phone broke, I wrote out. Apparently you ran apparently you landed directly on it in your pocket. Whole thing came apart, Annie answered. We were only able to call your father because principal the school records principal Scaler dug up. Fortunately she was quick about it and called them up and well, your parents paid you a visit. He offered the last bit in an attempt to comfort me, but I knew he was angry. I was right there with him. They visited all right. They visited and then hopped on a plane to go on a business trip again. Hell, maybe they were taking a vacation now that they thought I was in a coma and they could spend even less effort on me. My frown returned. Sorry, son. I dismissed his apology again. You did more than I deserve, Randy. Scratched down. He read the note and his face immediately contorted into a pained expression, as if I had struck him in the face. Inco, you will listen to me now. He spoke with a low intensity that made me straighten up in bed. He brought a hand to each of my shoulders, centered my focus on him. You are a troubled young man, certainly, and I am not going to lie and say you haven't made your mistakes, but never suggest again that you are unworthy of being cared for. Do you understand? And it was the Dilophosaurus frills quivered as if it was taking him a great effort to keep them under control. I forced myself to swallow down the slight fear sensation, my mind falling back to when the demon attacked me. So I vocalized alongside a slight nod to emphasize my understanding. His face lightened after another moment of scrutiny. Good. That's good. You never really knew how things were for you. It's it's a failing for your, it's a failing of your, I don't plan to allow it to continue, he said with conviction. I believed him when he said it. I didn't believe I was worthy of that conviction, but I knew Randy was being honest with me in his intent. My throat tightened up again for a moment, but I managed to keep my eyes from watering. Randy was an incredible person. After some, from the outside, likely amusing bickering, I managed to convince Randy to take my ID and credit card and a handwritten note to my account code to pick up a new phone. He didn't seem like the technical sort, not the slight man, so I just told him to go with whatever the sales rep suggested. I didn't like the idea of me buying something unseen for likely over $1,000, but I refused to let him pay for it. I even threatened to walk myself out of the hospital and buy it myself if he was going to fight me on that point, which ultimately got him to relent. It was a good thing he did, because I didn't know. I don't think I'd have managed to make it past the door of the room if I'd tried. I probably had a little over an hour to myself again as he ran his errand and let me have some time to think. Randy being here for me was a measure of support I didn't likely deserve, but I could also tell it was what I needed. It was mid-afternoon now. The doctor said a specialist would be by tomorrow, so it sounded like that aside, I had pretty much nothing to do for the rest of the day but focus on getting better. And for that, I meant focusing on what I did wrong. And the those itches like hell. Randy was probably one of the kindest people I've ever met. That he would go out of his way to be here all day for me. Some random entitled human douche that had a kinda attachment to his family. Spoke incredibly of his character. Going off what the doctor said prior, the pains had visited, so Ekla at least also Sophia had dropped in, though she hadn't appeared at all today, otherwise. The fourth she was likely holding down the fort back at their place. Olivia likely wasn't in a good state of mind, but given that Randy hadn't said anything happened to her, she was likely at home. If Damien and Vinny were also at home, then Sophia was probably there to keep the peace. Not that I was worth her coming all the way up to visit me in the hospital regardless. The formal obviously had been a shocking train wreck, downright cataclysmic. It was supposed to have been the night everything got better, and instead, I'm pretty sure I destroyed my friendship with Damien, made my girlfriend break up with me, also got her almost